All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on the Beyond the Veil Exploring the Paranormal and Psychic Realms webinar. Our date is November 11th, 2024. On this beautiful day, we have so many speakers, light workers, researchers, doctors, scientists, galactic emissaries, and much more. You will not be missing out. You will not be bored in this today's conference. So I want to thank everybody for being here. And today we are going to be stepping into an extraordinary journey beyond the veil, where the paranormal meets psychic. Beyond the Veil brings together experts from across the globe to guide you through the mysteries of the unseen as we dive into the supernatural with our live demonstrations, engagement workshops, and power discussions on psychic abilities, paranormal encounters, energy healing, and much, much more. So without further ado, let me introduce our first workshop of the day with JJ and Desiree Hurtak and Alan Steinfeld. How are you doing today?
Great. Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
having a great time. We're here actually in Mexico, the land of the sacred pyramids. And there's actually one really near us. So it's something we enjoy.
We're in the home of the famous novelist Carlos Vente, a great author of Mexico who was able to capture really the consciousness changes back in the 1950s. And so here we are in the 21st century, and we're at a fantastic time of revealing secrets.
Also, I want to say about my friends there, the Hurtaks, talking about Beyond the Veil. Dr. J.J. Hurtak is one of the few people who has actually gone beyond the veil into these other higher levels and dimensions and brought back, I would say, a textbook of these other realities, the Keys of Enoch Book of Knowledge. And it's one of the most important books written in the 20th century and now into the 21st century. He's kind of completing that cycle. And Beyond the Veil is a key to understanding these books that JJ has written.
What Dr. Jack's holding up is, in addition to the 54 keys in the larger book, Dr. Jack has now done 10 additional keys. Actually, this year will be the 10th in 2025. So we're excited about that. Each one has a different cover, a different topic. But I want to introduce also Alan Steinfeld, who actually did this great book called Making Contact. And he was nice enough to put us in chapter 3. But he actually has Linda Moulton Howe, Whitley Strieber. You're familiar with him. He wrote Communion, and John Mack. And who else, Alan?
Grant Cameron.
Grant Cameron, Daryl Anka, Carolyn Corey. You know, the thing about all of this, Beyond the Veil, it's about consciousness. It's about the shift of consciousness because we've been conditioned to think reality is sort of two-dimensional. And what Desiree and JJ's work is so important in mentioning is that there's much, much more to who we are as human beings that is already beyond the veil, but we have to learn how to access that. Isn't that true?
Right. Well, Alan, I was going to say also you have a YouTube channel called New Realities with tons of subscribers. And the most unique thing is you have everybody who's anybody on there,
Right.
Deepak Chopra and ourselves, of course. So that's really exciting. We're going to start today, I think, though, with talking about extraterrestrials because Alan may be off to Washington in a few days. What's going on there?
Well, this is the most exciting time in human history, Melanie. Do you know that? Do you realize that we are on the verge of a disclosure of a secret that's been kept not just 80 years from the American public, but hundreds of years from the human community at large. And of course, some religious texts talk about it, some metaphysical texts. There's been people who have been in touch with these other realities like JJ and Desiree. But what's happening in Washington on the 13th, that's in 2 days, is a congressional hearing where witnesses like Lou Elizondo, who wrote this book, I just was reading it here, Eminent, The Inside Pentagon's Hunt for UFOs. So he was a former intelligence officer, and he says, wait, this stuff is real. How is that possible? No one talks about it. And he's saying, I got to tell the American people what's really going on. So he quit his intelligence job and has come out to lead the charge about the nature of reality. This is not just about UFOs or little green or gray men. It's about a bigger picture. Can you describe that, JJ or Desiree? Yeah.
Yes, in fact, that if he is successful, that is to say, Lou and others formerly of government, to push the envelope to say, look, we are not alone in the universe. We have cosmic cousins, we have friends, we would call cosmic cultures. Then we move to a whole new arena of what I call space law and space psychology. This is my new book entitled Intergalactic Space Law and Intergalactic Space Diplomacy. It means that we have to understand our responsibilities as human beings to live peacefully with those from the other dimensions.
Right. So the imminent book that you showed, Alan, it was #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. So that's really exciting. And in there, he talks about everything, including remote viewing, which you're going to be doing right after we jump off in about an hour or so. So that's kind of exciting. You know, you wouldn't think that remote viewing would come up in these type of things, but the military, of course, uses remote viewing. And Lou actually indicates that by remote viewing in some higher levels, you actually call in some of these intelligences. That's a very interesting thing as well.
Well, actually, go ahead.
Continue what Desiree has said. That's been our work behind the scenes with remote viewing in our textbook, Mind Dynamics in Space and Time, which is all of the research done privately by government scientists at Stanford Research Institute in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. So now we've reached really the bonus of realizing we have this terrific ability to reach out, make contact, and make sense of the human evolution.
Right. And one of the things Lou Elizondo talks about in this book, Imminent, is that he was hired for this to be an insider in the UFO investigations in the government because he was a remote viewer. He got that job because he had been trained as that. And so they thought, oh, this guy's already open to some out there stuff. So let's put him in charge of some of this investigations. And that's when he realized what people were denying in government, that nothing here to see, folks, was actually a reality.
And you know, that's interesting because that takes us back to an older friend of ours who's no longer with us, but it's astronaut Gordon Cooper, who in 1951, when he was flying his jet plane over the border of East and West Germany, and there were MiGs, Russian planes also flying, they looked up 51. That means before any of our technology had that, there was a flotilla of UFOs. He came back and reported it. What did they do? Call him crazy? No, they gave him the job of an astronaut. It's exactly what you just said about Lou Elizondo, because there is this hidden side to reality that the government does know about, and they're willing to work with people who have the ability to understand some of that.
But you know, Desiree, go ahead, JJ.
Alan and all of us, if I can paraphrase what Gordon said before he passed away, he said we have to come out of that old box of lies and understand our responsibilities to tell the people the truth. We're not alone.
So back in 2023, some of you are familiar with this, there was a UAP public hearing at the House of Representatives. This is something to watch on YouTube. It's about a little over a 2-hour show. If you want to jump right into it, it's about 23 minutes when the three people started talking. One was Graves, that's his name, and he was a witness. Second was Grush, he was a whistleblower, and the third was Favor, he's another witness. These are all military people who have done more than just seen something. They were in the middle of a lot of experiences. So this is so exciting. Now, November 13th, 2 days from now, you're announcing it on your show, Melanie, is going to be another public hearing. So this is exciting. Maybe it'll go farther, maybe it won't. You know, one of the things Lou said on the News Nation program he did, he says that disclosure, which is what we're talking about, is not a sprint, it's a marathon. But every step that we take, including this program talking about UFOs, is a step forward.
Well, and what it's about is not just like, oh yeah, we've been lying about this, and guess what? We have company. it changes the very nature of reality that we are living in. This is one of the reasons the government is holding it back. They think it's going to upset religions, people's belief system, people's own identity. People think, have been told or brainwashed to think, oh, we're all alone in the universe. Life is an anomaly. There's no such thing as higher intelligence. So this opens these questions, which Hurtak's been teaching around the world about what's possible for the human being. That's why it's so important.
Right. And I want to say on News Nation, something was brought up. This is the Russ Coulthart interview with Lou Elizondo. And he said some of the military and government officials feel that these beings are not positive. So what do we think about that? I think this is important to bring up. Well, we feel what's out in space, and I think this is so critical, is just like what's here. So do we live on a negative planet? Not really. You know, there's some negativity, there's some bad things going on. There's some people who want to, you know, will hurt you if they can get away with it. But the majority of people, and that's the same as alien intelligence, the majority is fine. In fact, some are really here to help. We're in here in Mexico, as I mentioned, and there's a volcano called Popocatépetl, and it's between Mexico City and Puebla, two of the biggest cities practically in the world, but at least in this country. And there are UFOs. Jaime Maussan, a very famous UFO reporter, a very good friend of ours, films all the time there, and there's UFOs coming in and out. In fact, so much that Jaime thinks it's a base. I don't think it's a base. I think they're trying to stop that volcano from going off. So, and you know, Captain Favor, who was in the 2023 House of Representatives meeting, he was the guy in San Diego that was looking at UFOs, and it was on the
back in 2004
on the Nimitz. And I think some people are now claiming there's a base off of San Diego. I don't know about that. I grew up in Florida, and I can guarantee you there is a base off of Florida. That I know, because even before I met my husband, I knew about that base because I had people that had contact and I had seen things. But let's go back for a minute. One of the important things of San Diego is if you do the right thing, you can probably neutralize some of the earthquake fault lines that are going up to LA and all the way up to San Francisco. So what's cool about that is you really, you know, they are helping us. Those are the good guys. Then there's a bunch of people just checking us out. Then there's the negative. So, you know, we have to realize there's no difference in consciousness out there, locally out there, we'll say in our Milky Way and, you know, maybe the local universe, than there is down here.
Well, it's like the old saying, as above, so below. So, you know, yes, there's good aliens, not so good, neutral. But one thing Einstein said, you have to ask yourself, is the universe a friendly place? And I think it is a friendly place. And I think these beings are really looking out for our best interests, or else we probably would have destroyed ourselves. You know, we have a lot more to fear from our fellow humans than we do from aliens, from people who are afraid of whatever these things are. And
right.
so,
we can talk about nuclear. There's actually a nuclear power plant in Argentina called Atucha, and they've actually been seen around. Fukushima, you know, we encourage the people to watch the Encounters film on Netflix, and the fourth one is on Fukushima. And you have people in the neighborhood, so to speak, talking about the fact that, yes, UFOs were seen there, and they think that they try to neutralize the radiation. And we don't have to talk about other places like Robert Saleh does in all the bases that got neutralized with nuclear silos in their weapons.
So this is a worldwide phenomena. In 1986, I was in Brazil. You can see me here getting pictures for NASA authorities. These unusual vehicles represent a whole flotilla, a group of spaceships, each one being the size of an American football field. They actually appeared over an unknown nuclear site that was being built in Brazil. They blew the whistle to the chagrin of Brazilian political authorities. So we have, in the last 80 years, positive evidence that the majority of space intelligent life forms are bringing us into an awareness that this is a precious planet that must be preserved, not destroyed by, shall we say, weapons of mass destruction. And we, as a humanity, looking up and seeing that we have friends, cosmic cultures, as astronaut Edgar Mitchell calls them, we have this responsibility of preparing ourselves for quantum change.
Even Ronald
Right.
Reagan, UN, said something like, once we understand that, we'll see ourselves as a more global people.
Well, that's why this time is such an important moment in human history. This has never been a moment where suddenly the world realizes we're not alone in the universe. I mean, religions have sort of said that, philosophies, but when you get an official kind of institution coming out and saying, guess what? Maybe they'll say you've been lied to, whatever, but this is real. I think that's a paradigm of the utmost importance that's starting to take form, and how that will affect us technologically, biologically, socially, psychologically, philosophically is not the big question, but it's the renaissance, I feel, that's going to be coming to the human race that we've never seen before. Because you know what, the renaissance of the Middle Ages, that led from the Dark Ages into the European Renaissance, that came about because of the printing press, where information got more widespread, which we have sort of now equivalent to the internet. It came about with the discovery of a new world that the Europeans had found, and that's what we're discovering now. There are new worlds. And it also came about with the ancient understanding of the Greeks and Romans, who saw a bigger philosophy of consciousness. So those three elements are very much at work right now, and that's why I feel it's going to lead to a new renaissance that human beings have yet to see, as far as inventions, technology, society, money, currency, all that is about to change. So,
well, the word is risorgimento, rebirth. This is the whole idea of the Renaissance in the new sense of the 21st century, giving us a rebirth of new psychology, new sociology, new cosmology, new spirituality, newness of life in all directions and all forms. It's a fantastic way that you beautifully described, Ellen, of our waking up together and going forward together rather than going backwards through fear, through negativity, and the undercurrents of separation. This has been the tragedy of the 20th century. You're finally beginning to see we can pass through.
Well, but the big question is, so why don't they just land on the White House lawn? Alan, what does Stanton Friedman say about that?
Stanton Friedman, we do a lot of these lectures around the country, and Desiree always likes this line by Stanton Friedman that I quote, is that, who wants to be friends with a bunch of apes whose favorite pastime is tribal warfare, which is what the human race on all continents, all races, all religions have been occupying their time with. Let's go against these other, because they don't believe what we believe. We don't like them. It's over. That way of looking at things is over. And not to get political, but I think someone like Donald Trump represents a force of chaos, where it is a disruption of the old institutions that have to, I'm not for or against, well, a little bit against, but I see it now. Well, if the collective of this country had voted him in, and that comes from a collective consciousness, maybe they are seeing the need for the disruption of the old and something new to come in its place.
Well, also, not to talk politics or take sides, but he did say on the Joe Rogan's interview that he does believe we can't be the only life form here. And if you go back to, there's actually an Israeli, I know Israel isn't too popular, but he was a general in the space program. And he said, I think it was around 2018, 2019, that actually at the time that Trump wanted to come forward with some of this information, but the ETs, and that's why I brought that up, the ETs said, we're not ready. I mean, really, do they want us out in space with what? I mean, fighting each other and all that stuff. So we really do have to change. Maybe like chaos will help with the change. Who knows? I mean, I'm not taking sides on that, but basically, bottom line, I think we have to, in our consciousness bodies, and that's where remote viewing comes in and all the other things that Dr. Jack and I teach in terms of who we are and why we're here, have to get beyond the negativity. We have to get beyond the separations. We have to start seeing more working together. And whatever that takes, whether a collapse of this or that or total transformation, is really what we need. And that's global. It's not just local either.
And Desiree just mentioned the name of a very famous Israeli scientist who spoke in his book called Beyond the Horizon of artifacts on Mars. I actually published a book years ago called The Face of Mars, where I actually give the pictures, the NASA pictures of what was called an Inca city and the pyramids of Elazim that Desiree is holding up.
So this is in the Keys of Enoch. And we think one of the biggest things, if nothing comes out of this great hearing that's coming out this week, and there's actually 2 dates, November 13th, I think what Alan is the House of Representatives, and November 19th, I think might be the Senate if we're lucky, if it goes that far. But if anything comes out, nothing comes out of that, the next thing I think is Mars. And we're really gung-ho on Mars because even some of the rovers are starting to find rocks there that seem to have some form of, maybe life indications from the far past. Let's take a look because we believe that Mars was a colony. We believe that Mars also is still being visited by extraterrestrials watching our planet, and so is the moon. So kind of interesting scenarios. So if nothing else, Mars may be the next big link. Of course, until they can get the rock back here, they can't confirm that what they're looking at through the cameras of the rovers was, primitive life from a distant past. But who knows? We want to see.
It goes back to life is an emergent property. It's not a freak of nature. It's essential to nature, life itself, and conscious life at that. What were you saying, JJ?
You wanted to show the Inca city because we're here in the mountains of Mexico. And you can see that this is on Mars. This is not
on our planet, South America. This is on Mars, a sister planet, which shows a highly developed system of interlocking structures. And I've been pushing the envelope for 50 years, getting hearings of scientists behind the scenes to come forth and say, look, we're not alone in the universe. And our sister planet lost its atmosphere millions of years ago. According to African, Egyptian, and Oriental traditions, the survivors of Mars came to our planet. Mars was in the Goldilocks zone of earlier evolutionary possibilities. So again, the window is open, the door is open. Our human imagination is open to put all of this together and say, we need a new roadmap. And Alan, you're part of this. You're going to be there in Washington. You're going to take notes, and you're going to let us know that we can, hopefully, in a very positive sense, go forward as cosmic citizens.
And just to go back for Mars for 1 minute, actually people say, well, water is so required for life. But actually, all those valleys that they see was once water, places of water. In fact, and Mars was known to have more water on it than the Earth does today. And now they feel the water is underground. And of course, you're looking at different star systems now around, or I should say satellites like moons around Jupiter and Saturn. Some of these also indicate water. Going out with the James Webb Space Telescope, they're indicating water and they're indicating oxygen in many places. So, absolutely, Alan, life is abundant. And
yes, I want to answer this question in the chat by Melanie. You could ask, are ETs still evolving like humans? I think absolutely. That is why they're interfacing with us. We evolved to being exposed to new ideas, and they're here observing us, watching over us, but it's part of their evolution to interact with us. So, and the universe, consciousness itself is about evolution. And that's what I just wanted to add on top of what JJ and Desiree were saying. This is not so much about life being abundant, but consciousness. What life embodies consciousness. So if consciousness is abundant throughout the universe, then who we are as consciousness is not localized, this gets us to remote view, to the body, but in a sense, we are the extraterrestrials. I don't know if the Hurtaks would agree with that, but our consciousness is not of the earth, it's in the earth, it's embodied in these earth bodies, but what we are is trans-dimensional conscious beings that span time and space.
Right. Now, Alan, we can't agree with you more. And let's just take it slow because we want to get into who we are on a cosmic level.
Yes.
First of all, Chaim Hesed, this Israeli general, he said that actually some of the ETs wanted us to work with them because they wanted to understand better the nature of the universe. Now, this goes back to Linda Moulton Howe, who's done a lot of research, one of which is on cattle mutilation. And she's starting to see the fact that some of these ETs tend to think that we are advanced beings. I know we said, they're keeping us here because we fight and have tribal warfare, but our soul, this is a different reality. We believe, in terms of the keys of Enoch and in terms of the Bible, that we came from a higher light presence. If everyone goes back to Genesis, you remember, at some point God gave us garments of skin because we ate of the apple. So what does that really mean? Well, before that, we weren't in garments of skin. We were in light energy. So that's why we end up with unique mathematics throughout our body, like the spine has certain mathematics of 12 and 7, our hands certain.
And when we talk about God, we're talking about divine source expressing itself in a wide variety of life forms. We are one of these myriad life forms. And we have come to the realization of research with scientists throughout the world, with anthropologists, even with shamans and people with psychic ability, that behind the movements of thought of traditional history, there is an overall blueprint of life throughout the universe that we must become acquainted with if we are going to eventually evolve and graduate.
And continuing with what Alan said, also, we don't think we evolved from the microbes and the little fish or whatever from the earth. We believe, as you'll hear from Vivian Chevet and others, that we really are cosmic beings. That's why when people look at extraterrestrials, I mean, when they've encountered them is the right word, you'll see grays, you'll see tall, you'll see reptilians, you'll see praying mantis types, you'll hear about them at the end as well. You see all these different types, but you also find those that look like us because we are cosmic beings. We've just been dumbed down, and we've lived here for too long in a certain sense. It is time to get off the planet, not completely, but to, be cosmic beings once again. So there's the tall whites, there's the extended skulls that you see in places like South America and also in Egyptian hieroglyphs and petroglyphs there. So you find, we are cosmic beings, and we're waking up to becoming Homo galacticus and Homo universalis. Alan?
Well, I think that's a very important point that Desiree made, is that we are evolving, but we also descended. So people talk about ascension. There's also coming back from the source into bodies. We've taken on these forms so we could live in the material world, understand the nature of reality, and then return. So it's this great cycle of descending so we could experience the realities that we've created on these higher levels. And then as we start to understand the nature of the soul, the nature of the bigger realities, who we are as consciousness, there's an evolution that happens taking us back to, it's a spiral. It's not just a circle. And it's like, in your book, The Oversoul Awakening, Desiree and JJ, you lay that out in very detailed pictures about this evolution of the soul consciousness, and that's really why we're here.
And going back to Linda Moulton Howe, some of these ETs she's finding, whether it's the grays or certain other levels of intelligence, they've noticed that our soul consciousness actually can go higher. And this is one of the things we write about in your book, Making Contact, and we highly recommend it. Of course, it's available on Amazon, that there's different forms of intelligence. So there's the extraterrestrial in its many forms. There's a book called Extraterrestrial Species Almanac, Dr. Hurtak's written about in there. But that talks about 80 different extraterrestrial forms. But we also consider there's extra celestial forms, which are beings that are like soul teachers, soul guides that are not normally in the physical dimension, but the local dimensions that are, you can see them with your spiritual eyes and that are here to help. And then there's what we call, Dr. Hurtak,
the ultra-terrestrials, beings that have gone beyond the physical form of life. We would call them the angels or avatars, beings that are simply in energy form, but have the ability to manifest themselves in physical
And see,
forms.
we have the ability to connect with those angelic presences, with those higher realities, even with Christ, because he was on this planet, which means he was quantumly entangled with us. So all those realities exist. And that's what ETs are fascinated by us about, because some of them are local levels of intelligence and don't have the consciousness expansion abilities that we do through our soul and our soul spirit.
So this is
Right,
the
I think the Hurtaks are making a good point that the nature of the human soul is something special that is being witnessed by other beings, like the nature, our essential nature, which is beyond the veil, Melanie, which is where we're going, is the key factor in our evolution to a high society. JJ, you were saying.
if one looks carefully at all of the great art forms from China, from India, from Japan, all throughout Africa, Egypt, and of course the New World, looking at the earliest petroglyphs and writings in stone, there is this great emphasis on the living cosmos, that we are but one part of a living family of creation. And it's this thrill of realizing we're finally waking up sensibly and psychologically, the fact that we're not alone, that gives us a sense of hope. No matter what political system now exists, we know this is going to pass away according to the keys of Enoch, and we will join a galactic family of nations, perhaps a supergalactic family of life forms. But we must accept the fact that we've dwelled too long on the three-dimensional aspect of life, that life is multidimensional. And that was the great breakthrough of scientists that I worked with at Stanford Research Institute in California, the fact that we are multidimensional beings, waking up in a vast and awesome universe. We're no longer three-dimensional beings who have to suffer the dictates of crazy politicians or regimes of power that suppress the higher intellectual, the psychic, the metaphysical, and the higher spiritual aspect of what is called in the Eastern tradition enlightenment, or the Buddha consciousness, and the large Western traditions, the Christ consciousness, of realizing we are anointed as light beings.
But do you realize what a disruption that is, Melanie, to the materialistic, mechanistic worldview that says you got to make, work to make money and get more things and accumulate more of this materiality, when you're listening to what JJ and Desiree are talking about? Well, yes, you want to have what you need, but the whole goal of being here is not to accumulate things, it's to expand the nature of consciousness and the levels of compassion that the soul can embody. That's
I call this to see life as having a vast and awesome power of participation. And life is not simply getting your plastic credit card, accumulating material wealth, and retiring to the demise of much of the world that hovers in poverty, with little food, with little happiness. So we are here, hopefully, in a larger arena, a larger blueprint of evolution to awaken people to their cosmic awareness that will lead to a type of cosmic culture.
You see, I think that's one of the reasons disclosure has been such a something that is kept secret. You know why? Because once you realize we're not alone in the universe, consciousness is universal, this whole push for, like the stock market getting higher and wealth, I mean, those are all great things, but they're not the thing. The thing is about the expansion of human consciousness. And when you get into the fact that, yes, there are other beings here and they're interchanging with us and they're not after our oil, they're after, stopping our nuclear weapons proliferation so we don't destroy ourselves. That's really there. You don't see them over other places. I mean, they're monitoring our nuclear arsenal. And one of the things people say is that they came in greater numbers after 1945 is because of the atomic blast. And I've a guy who used to say, maybe it was Stanton Friedman, said the ETs came and said, uh-oh, the teenagers have the car keys. We better come down and make sure they don't get them in trouble. It doesn't get them in trouble. So we're in accelerated time. there's something that the shift is happening. We're moving into a fourth, fifth, sixth dimensional reality, but that comes with an expansion of who we are. That's the essence.
Absolutely. The keys of Enoch tell us that we must go beyond the unholy trinity of competition, acquisition, consumption. This destroying Mother Earth. We must hear the cry of Mother Earth. We must hear the cry of our soul. We must realize the cosmic cry if we are going to make this quantum change work for all people. And this must come joyously out of the inner resources of our consciousness.
So it really does seem like the veils are being lifted. This is something that I believe. But we also have to understand the planet we're living on. And I think it's very interesting. We are living in a world of duality. And every moment is a moment of choice. And really, we have to decide, and each one of us collectively and individually really are making that choice. I go back to the Bible, the scroll of Jonah. Everyone knows Jonah and the whale, but you probably forgot most of the book. The book actually starts with the fact that the people of Nineveh were going to be destroyed by God because of the way they were living. And so Jonah comes and tells them, hey, this is what I heard. He was the prophet. And they changed. And they changed and everything got better. Everything was right. And then at the end, of course, he looked like the idiot, but that didn't matter. I mean, the point is that you can change. Things can transform. It's sad that it takes suffering or it takes destruction to a certain point to make the right decision. It shouldn't take that. When we tune in to a higher reality, which we believe is our overself, the book is called Over Self Awakening. It's available on Amazon and also through our website, keysofenoch.org. But basically, when you tune into your higher self, which is much more aware, it'll give you insights. It'll put you in the right place at the right time. It'll give you an understanding of who you're talking to and how to work with those people. You know, we have so much more within ourselves if we reach out to that higher consciousness, which is part of us. And that higher consciousness, I believe, is also aware of the universe, past, present, and future. We have precognition as well.
So how do we do this? We activate within our mind the vibratory aspect of our universal identity. And that opens up through the right hemisphere, which is the female side of our human makeup, the metaphysical, the musical, the metapsychological aspects of reaching out, not only through intention, but extension into a higher consciousness. And we find in our work throughout the world that people who resonate with the higher mantrams or the sacred expressions of vibration realize that their body, it becomes a musical instrument of joy and purpose. It's the whole field of music, the whole field of sacred geometry, the whole field of being able to think in technicolor and enjoy that allows us to come out of this two-dimensional black and white reality that keeps us suppressed, that keeps us divided, that keeps us in certain fear and uncertainty scenarios. So this is the time, not only of smelling the coffee, but what the scriptures tell us to put on Joseph's coat of many colors, when we can change our garments of three-dimensionality into the multi-dimensional aspect of multicolored resonance.
Yeah, so this is, you're right, JJ. This is a very exciting times we're in. We have to embrace it. We can't fear the unknown. When we fear the unknown, we're just projecting the known onto the unknown. The unknown, where we're heading, it's like that analogy of stepping off into the unknown path, but your foot will land on the stone that will be there to move. We walk into the unknown. We're full of wonder and possibilities and the unimaginable. The imaginable is what we know. The unimaginable is what we have yet to know and yet to contemplate. And this is what the world is waiting for us to embrace. Yes.
But we can definitely know the unknown. I think that's the important thing. And it does come from the consciousness field. I just want to give a couple examples. We can get into talk a little bit on remote viewing shortly. So Ingo Swann was, we'll say, an artist and living in New York. And he started literally the remote viewing movement with Hal Puthoff, which eventually got into the work with Russell Targ, who's a very close friend of all of us. But in actuality, one of the things he did, and you can see it on the internet, in 1973, with his friend Harold Sherman, he remote viewed Jupiter. And when he remote viewed Jupiter, again, 1973, right? he saw rings around Jupiter. No one, not even the people looking through telescopes, saw rings around Jupiter. And it was in 1979, when the Voyager probe went by, that they confirmed what Ingo Swann had seen. Now, how does this work? Alan, how does it work?
It works because our conscious mind is connected to the quantum field, as Joe Dispenza said. It knows the past, present, and future, and is actually non-local to our body, so we can know about anything, anywhere, all the time. Just our personality, our left brain, as JJ said, is so overdeveloped. It's in the way of our infinite gnosis, the infinite knowing, but we have access. That is what makes our souls so valuable to look at by ETs, because we have access to this realm, and we're just beginning to suspicion that and understand it, suspect that. Because when we realize that we are infinite beings, there's nothing we can't do, nothing is impossible. We create a whole new society about that. It is one of the keys, isn't that, JJ? One of the keys to
the Greek word gnosis, which is the word for higher knowledge. Astronaut Mitchell, when he formed the Noetics Institute for higher studies, he drew upon the same concept of the Greek knowledge base, higher expanded consciousness. And so we are in a new sphere of the higher mind. We're suddenly realizing not only do we see objects, phenomena, but we have noumena. We have the ability to reach out to the minds of the life behind the objects. So the last 80 years, the governments of the West have been saying, well, these are strange objects we can't explain, so why should we detail this to the public if we cannot come up with the answers? No, we have reached the realization that we're now working with the minds of the noumena of the universe. And we're living in a living universe that talks to us, that speaks to us. And this is the great excitement, Ellen, that you share with Desiree and I and others, that we have this ability to reach out through remote viewing, remote sensing, remote healing, remote communication, which was called historically by those theologians the gifts of the divine or Holy Spirit. We're living in an age, technically, of the coming of a new spiritual field, an energy that lifts us from normal two-dimensional, three-dimensional knowledge into multidimensional knowledge. Normal love that is selfish, that is ego-centered, into an ecological possibility of centeredness. We begin to love all life and understand the divine spark is in all life.
And I'm just going to take it down a notch for just a few minutes, because I think it's interesting when we're talking about our ability to understand. And that is something that was brought up, I believe, in the book Imminent with Lou Elizondo, and that is parts of the brain. And we believe those parts of the brain are connected with the pineal gland. The parts of the brain that Lou mentions is the caudate nucleus and the putamen. Now, those are part of the dorsal striatum. It's this kind of like almost, I would say, circular, but also spiral sides of the right and the left hemisphere of the brain. Inside the brain, it has that. And basically, if they are enhanced, supposedly, according to the research that Lou was talking about, that those people, either they have been enhanced or they are being enhanced, depending on what they can't determine. But I believe if you take those two sides and you go into a line, you get into the pineal gland,
which is connected right here with a spot, according to the Indian Sanskrit cultures,
as the sixth chakra.
So we have a natural biological antenna within our mind of minds.
You know, it's
right,
interesting.
but no, Desiree is hinting at the fact that when those parts of the brain are developed, people have more psychic abilities and more intuitive abilities. They've looked at the brains of remote viewers where have that more developed putum, and also in experiencers. UFO experiences also have a bigger development of that parts of the brain. That is our human internet. That is, I equate those parts to the fact that we can go beyond time and space. Desiree.
Right. So if you put those two together, you'll get also the pineal. What's interesting about the pineal gland, because you think it's a gland, why do they call it the third eye or the sixth chakra.
Or the seat of consciousness.
But why the third eye? If you cut it open, it actually has rods and cones, just like our eyes do. I don't know how the ancients understood that, but they did. So basically, we get the information. We believe these are like little antennas. They're inside the brain. I'm just putting it where they are. These little, like, kind of spiral circles. Then they, I believe, align to the pineal and help the pineal to reach into higher states of consciousness.
Right.
So we can know things past, present, and future.
So we have a mind within a mind that has multidimensional capabilities, a mind that has a cosmic antenna, literally, that can be put on fire.
Antennas.
This is why the ancient artists in India, China, and the Middle East had the golden auras around the heads of the saints. Those who had higher self-realization, those who had the gift of remote viewing, remote sensing, because that part of the human anatomy came alive and came into a golden octave. We call the octave in psychology the corona discharge of a higher mind that's suddenly activated. So we're going.
I want to answer Melanie's question about, is there any parts of the brain that we overuse or underuse? Yes, the left brain, the logical mind, is all people consider as thought. ABC 1, 2, 3, and that's been ingrained as a way of thinking from the time we're 4 or 5 years old. We go to school, we learn to identify things, we create the world as a semantic reality, not an actual reality. So when you see a tree, and this is what I talk about in remote viewing, you're not really seeing what's there. You're saying, oh yeah, I see, that's that, and you're put the world into a box. And with the right brain, and which accesses through remote viewing, which is underutilized, talks about not concretizing the world, not defining it, leaving it more fluid, more abstract. And that's such a key to understanding the nature of a bigger reality. I think this is really how ETs think. They are not collapsing the wave function and saying this is a table, that's it. They're keeping it all fluid. So when you keep the nature of reality not collapsed, you become more wave, less particle, and you can transcend time and space. That's my big theory about apprehension versus comprehension. Yes.
Right. So as you work with Alan in the next hour and a half, basically you'll see that if you do an intellectual overlay, that means using your left brain instead of your right side of the brain, you'll sometimes miss the point, because you really just need to be creative. What's the first thing that comes into your mind, not using the intellect? That's the key to all of this. The first image, the first pictures, because we're constantly actually receiving, and I believe sometimes it's lower local information, but a lot of times it can be even higher divine information. Those are always available to us. We just don't activate that aspect within us to bring that forth and to integrate it into our thinking process.
And that's the work of Melanie. She's bringing us all together to realize we're putting on a new consciousness, not just a word, but a whole field of energy experience, not just an experience, but something that connects with a collective experience of the human race waking up. And not simply the human race waking up, but our planet in conjunction with other planets that are sharing a greater evolutionary story. The keys of Enoch are the higher evolution. We are making a conjunction between the human race and space kind. Cosmic intelligence. We're making a relationship between the old self, the anatomical self of simply thinking only on one side of the brain, to the new self that uses both sides of the brain. And when in conjunction, a third brain, a brain of unity, is produced.
So I'll tell you a little bit about our chapter in Making Contact, that Alan's book, and that is a girlfriend of mine was a oceanographer, and she had a contract to go out with a team to the Bermuda Triangle. It just happened to be because that's where she was looking at. She wasn't looking at the Bermuda Triangle per se, but the area off of Florida. They encountered UFOs. They encountered alien intelligence. This is back in the early 70s.
They came out of the ocean.
And they talked to them, and they talked mostly through telepathic, as we all know if you've studied that. And she was told certain things not to say. Okay, I'm telling you certain things. you can say you saw us, you can say this, that, and the other, but don't say this other stuff. And she was in the kitchen of my friend, who Alan as well knows. His name is James, and he's a lawyer, and he was really plotting her. He was going, get me this information. I want this information. He was tricking her, you know, how lawyers kind of get you into doing things. And she started saying something. This is years after her experience, years after. And all of a sudden, a shelf in his kitchen flew up, didn't fall down, flew up with things falling way off of it. She goes, I can't say anymore. So it might be scary for some people, but she was quantumly entangled with those aliens. And anytime she moved into certain parts of her brain to recall certain information she was not to bring forth, they were there. So that's how it's just a new concept for us, but we are actively entangled. When we were down with the Shavanti Indians in Brazil, they give you like a wristband. It's just a cord, but you are mentally connected in some way. They all sleep in the same room, like you saw with Dancings with Wolves. They are mentally half the time talking to each other through their minds, not through their mouths.
So we have responsibility to preserve the sensitivity of relationships, to understand the harmonics of the heart, to understand the love of the tree, the bush, the insect forms of life, all of which is part of the garden of creation, simplified in the ancient text of the Bereshit, the book of Genesis, where God gives the human race the opportunity linguistically to name the animals, insects, but in the deeper meaning to use a multiple language of communication with life.
And Rupert Sheldrake says how animals also communicate with us. He's done experiments with both birds and, of course, dogs and cats, but the dog...
Seniors don't pay for groceries.
But the dog is very interesting that basically the dog can be sleeping all day, sleeping all day, sleeping all day. And when you think of coming home, he has a camera on the dog wakes up and starts looking for you. We had this experience also with a friend of ours where we live. He had a dog. The dog knew 10 minutes, not even hearing his car, 10 minutes before he got there, that he was coming home. We didn't have to wonder when he was coming home. The dog told us way in advance when he was coming home.
So to wrap it up, in a sense, when you say beyond the veil, what we're all trying to point to is that the physicality, just the physical is the veil. When we go beyond it, we realize there's more than just the body. We have to honor the body, love the body, and respect it, but we're not just that. We are not the body. We have the bodies, but the veil is when we go beyond that physical, limited perspective and open up to this huge world that JJ discovered in his journeys into the unknown. So
let's talk about that.
This is what is known in mystical Judaism and Christianity as the changing of the garments. The fact that we are now consciously aware of the limitations of the three-dimensional garment of clothes or our physiological self. And now when we realize there's much more to life, that we have a higher self, an overself, we begin to realize, wait a minute, we can go into these other dimensions with just as much vitality, just as much reality, just as much of the psychological power of the mind that we are capable of experiencing now on a collective basis. This is the collective consciousness, going from mind one to mind two. Mind two is the ability to see events before they happen, deal collectively with the other dimensional realities in the universe. And the ultimate situation is we as a human race begin to move up the ladder of creativity.
And actually, it's very important, I believe, at this time. I think if we only use the intellectual mind, we will not be at the right place at the right time. We will not know which jobs to pick. We will not know almost anything, basically, because things are getting kind of chaotic.
And we'll be manipulated by AI that becomes the new mind. We will surrender the higher mind, mind two, of multidimensional ability.
But if we start using the right side of the brain, or what I would say is the merger of the right and left hemisphere, activating the pineal and receiving information from a higher kind of trinity type power from above, we will have the insights into all things, not only for ourselves, but for humanity and for each other. So that's so important that we bring through this higher consciousness. And we encourage meditation at least once a day. If you want to do it twice a day, that's great, because it also sets a whole energy forward for you for the entire day that you're living. And then you can get warnings. A girlfriend of mine, you know, she was driving the car, all of a sudden she got this warning: you need to pull over, you need to stop, you need to stop, you know, and she pulled over and she avoided an accident. So there's so many you know, things that happen, the synchronicities that are happening in people who are tuning into that higher power, that higher force. And I just
want to share with you now something from our textbook, Mind Dynamics, which is really the real X-Files, the real declassified documentation of what scientists were doing behind the scenes years ago. When we were doing our research in Egypt, our colleague, Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, famous mathematician, was in
Phoenix, yeah.
And she was able to tune into us according to a certain time of day. We didn't give her any physical information, otherwise she would know too much. We'd simply say, Elizabeth, tune into us at a certain time of day.
So I'm going to see if I can show this picture. Basically, you can see where we are, and you can see what she picked up on. For people, actually, she picked up on the fact that the door, it's hard to see that, is cobalt blue. She picked up on the, obviously, on the light post. Here, this is even a better place. You can see the cobalt blue that she writes about, the lamppost. She had it all. And we were in Egypt. In other times, she put the pyramids. And in that time, she actually put.
She did not know the details that we were at the university there, and we were about to give a lecture. And that light post that Desiree just showed you was a very ancient shape that had embellishments at the top underneath the sphere and at the bottom of the post itself. She picked up on that. Fantastic detail, which only a supermind could see.
So how does this work? Well, she called it working in 8 space or 8-dimensional space. We believe there's a consciousness field that is a global consciousness field, and we are not necessarily the only spot you know, that puts out information. We receive information. We're like biotransducers, receiving and sending information to that global field. And in addition to the global field, and we want to emphasize this in our closing, there's a universal field. That universal field can take us any place, any dimension, any reality. In fact, we can visit other planets, as you'll hear from some of the other speakers. We can actually tune into higher, we'll say, cosmic fields, like Daniel Brinkley had experienced in his near-death experience, literally going into other spaces and places. You don't need to die to get that, but a lot of the near-death experiences are starting to explain to us what these other realities are. And when they do that, it opens our reality to say, hey, well, can I visit that without dying? And the answer is yes. You can. A young couple said to me, they actually got married on another planet, even though they were conscious. I mean, these realities.
Well, psychically, this doesn't make any sense in terms of normative psychology and sociology, but in the sense of the new sciences, science guided by a consciousness, capital C, or higher superconsciousness, there is some aspect of us that's embedded within the greater story of creation from other planetary perspectives. So we require people to be in a sense of higher purity of heart, mind, and spirit to stand nakedness in the light of the eternal.
So yes, you can communicate with the Christ because he came here, so he's still entangled with this planet. Yes, we can communicate with the power of Melchizedek. Yes, we can tune in for the Eastern people with Kuan Yin, with the power of the Shakti energy. Yes, these are all part of our higher nature as we go through the veil that's limited us for generations.
So Shakti, Sophia, Shekinah all come together, as Ellen would say, in a special mantra. We begin to realize past, present, future is going beyond words into the actual field of experience. Right, Ellen?
Well, thank you, JJ. That's a great introduction to remote viewing, because remote viewing is going beyond the past, present, and future. It's going into this more time that is beyond time. You know, it's about the consciousness of the super conscious being. It's so do you want to wrap up, JJ and Desiree, and I'll jump into the
with a little meditation, maybe a 5-minute meditation.
Okay, let's do
visualize a light spark over our head. That light spark becomes now extended to the living universe within and without. We feel the vibration, what is called the Shakti, the energy spark that goes up and down our spine, beyond that to the top of our head and radiates in all directions, is seen by the great pictures, the mantrams, the tankas of an ancient Eastern tradition. But now as we begin to wrap the light around the world in the Western tradition of the ancient indigenous cultures and those we call of the Christ, we begin to see the greater light reaching out in prayer and joyous expression.
And so let us just say this expression, Adi Shakti Om. We'll say it, we won't make it too loud because of the, we're over the internet here and it cuts off sometimes.
Adi Shakti Om. 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 And as that light expands, we go into what the ancients, the prophets speak of as the Shekinah glory, of realizing that we are moving into an age of multidimensionality. We are moving into the age of the Spirit, the field of the Spirit, to which we feel glorious light.
Alan, would you like to add? And then I'll close.
So imagine there's this divine light coming through the top of your head from the infinite, from the source, awakening new levels of perception, new levels of awareness, connecting new neural nets of cognition. You are becoming the superhuman who can function on multiple dimensions, who's aware of your cosmic bodies and your greater mind, and you take that into your heart. And you embrace that infinite being that you are. And you breathe that in and breathe it out. And you embody the great magnificence of your being.
And so we come together with the Shakti, with the female dimension of the right hemisphere, the Sophia, connected with the Shekinah, the glorious light of the living universe, as divine spirit.
And let us understand that Sophia means wisdom. And it's not necessarily the wisdom of the earth, but it's also the wisdom of the heavens that is available to us all. And we ask that that wisdom come forth to each one of you who hears this broadcast, that the energy of the presence of the divine, known as the Shekinah or the Shekinah, will be with us always. When we carry that, it activates our heart chakra, our fourth chakra. It also activates our fifth chakra because when we speak, then we speak more with a greater love, a greater understanding, a greater wisdom. And we activates also our pineal gland or our sixth chakra where we see and we know more than we ever have before.
O divine source, use us as instruments of love for greater healing. Use us as instruments of joy for greater education. Use us as instruments of transformation for greater awareness that we are part of the infinite way, the infinite mind, the infinite divine family. And so it is, we go forth.
And we say, Sophia Shekinah, will add Ein Sof Or, which becomes the limitless light that exists in all of us. Let us feel that light coming down over our seventh chakra and activating our hearts and our minds and our souls and our spirit.
Sophia Shekinah, Ein Sof Or. 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 7 times for the 7 chakras, the 7 seals, the 7 lessons that we now take upon ourselves as humans in grace and humility and similitude to go forth as the light, the divine spark.
And so we want to thank Alan and we want to thank Melanie and we want to thank everyone who's participating here. If you want to know more about our work, go to keysofenoch.org. You can do that on our website. You can do that in other languages, Spanish as well. You can do that on YouTube. And of course, we want to recommend Alan's YouTube as well, which has many of our programs, and the Hurtaks on TikTok and Instagram and everything else, tragically. Take care. Thank you so much. Let's say the 4 amens, which we like.
The 4 directions of the complete human race Amen.
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 And
Amen.
Stay tuned for Alan Steinfeld.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.